Hi, I'm Sanne, and I have a lot to tell, so we have to start right away. First, I was wondering, can I interest you in a new car? Or are there any wine lovers here in the audience that might fancy a wine tasting event with peers? Well, if I cannot convince you to do this, maybe an APT could. Or in fact, maybe already did. These two emails were linked to the same thread group based on technical and strategical features. But I was wondering, can we also link these emails to the same thread group by how they use the scenario, the pretext, and social engineering techniques? You're about to find out in the next 35 minutes for this group, but also for other APTs. First, a small introduction about myself. My name is Sanne. Don't start with trying to pronounce my last name. It's pretty hard when you're not Dutch, and yes, that makes me a Dutchie. I joined Mandiant last year as a senior analyst, and I've worked as a red teamer before, sending numerous of phishing emails in my life. And later I joined the Dutch NCSC for analyzing emerging threats. During work time and after work time, I love to dive into everything malware related and related to threat actor data. And when I have still some time left, I am the coach of the European CTF team, backed by ENISA. I love to teach kids how to hack through my platform hack challenges. And you can find me at Adversary or CTF at the end of the week. So when we look at APT phishing last year, we see that 17% of the initial access, ways of getting initial access, were gained by using phishing emails. And yes, this includes APT phishing emails. Could be normal, just shoot with a scattergun, or spear phishing emails in this case. So a good second place, but we had a lot of big vulnerabilities last year that indicated the 38% for using exploits to get in. And if we talk about APTs, what do we define as an APT? Well, I guess you already know, but for the scope of this research, I have used the APT as the big groups that are directed by nation state for military, political, or economical advantages. I have used TEMPs, so those are the threat groups that start with TEMP, the precursor of APTs, and all related UNCs, uncategorized threat clusters. I didn't include the Finns because those ones have a financial motivation, and financial motivation, well, sometimes they just send it to everyone and see what sticks. So they are less likely to be stealthy and use advanced ways to send phishing emails. So APTs, TEMPs, and UNCs. And well, if you look at one APT, it's not only one cluster of an APT. There are a lot of uncategorized threat activities, threat groups that we link to these APTs because we don't have enough information, evidence to merge it with the real APT, but we suspect it with low, medium, or high confidence. And these are also included in the scope of phishing emails. And how do we do that clustering, like we saw on that graph? Well, we cluster normally, or clustering is normally done in three ways. First one is technical. So for example, you have a Yara rule that finds and detects attachments with a specific signature of malware family. You see that one hits and you cluster it because you think it's the same APT because they are the only ones using a specific kind of malware. The second one is a tactical one. So when an APT or group is using the same sequence of actions, for example, or they abuse the same CVEs. And the last one is strategical. You can also do some strategical clustering because some APTs always have the same kind of victims in the same industry or in the same countries. But what I miss in this list of three groups, or of three ways, is behavioral. Because we talk a lot about the human factor in cybersecurity, but we almost always focus on the victim side, so the one who clicks. But there's also someone on the attacker side having behaviors, creating those emails, writing those emails, creating those attachments, Word documents, or whatever. So there's always a behavioral part in an attack. And that's what I'm focusing on. So this research focuses on the behavioral characteristics of APT phishing emails by analyzing the content and the context of the email. And I'll show you what that is. But let's start with an example. If you get these two phishing emails, both written by a service desk wanting you to install some things with some instructions and a link to some malware, you might think that it's the same group. And it was actually the same group. It really looks alike. It is a similar scenario. And why is that? Because it's your vibeint calling. We have OSINT, we have UMINT, I'll introduce you vibeint. That's a kind of intelligence that is based on your gut feeling. So you think, yeah, well, this might be the same group because it looks like the same group. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a dog, etc. So vibeint is the one that you think, okay, this might be related. But I wanted to have actual numbers for actual evidence. That's why I was analyzing the scenario of a phishing email. So the content, the way it's written, and the context. The way it was written, so it does something with you. It tries to influence you. And if you dive into the content part, you see that actors, they can write a subject, they can use a specific salutation, so it's either personal or dear colleagues. They use a kind of language, they have textual features, that language, it includes an attachment or a URL, and it has a signature, most of the emails. And on the other way, there's also the context. Everything around the text or everything that was needed to create the scenario itself. So the sender type, was it someone you know? Was it an organization, or was it just sent from a random Outlook account? The theme of the email, what kind of theme does it have? Does it use persuasion techniques to make you click? What is the goal of the email, and does it include any design? That was the base of the basic of the start of my analysis. I started with a data set. So I had emails from the last decade, from tracking campaigns by Mandiant, and from VirusTotal. That was around 4,000 emails. I had to remove the duplicates, quite some actually, because sometimes they send it to multiple people. And I started with this set, just a lot of email files. I extracted the textual features from these email files with Spacy. So it detected the language and extracted the textual features. And I extracted the contextual features by using a local large language model, because I can use it to categorize some things. The textual features were broken down into stylometry, so stylometric features, so how it's written, some basic things. And I used the language model to actually dive deeper into the word use. And the contextual features, they were put in a contextual analysis model. Both were Keras models, and I used deep learning using TensorFlow. And by taking these predictions from these three models and putting them also in a model and train it, I could actually do predictions based on the set I had. So let's start with the first model. The first model was the stylometric model. And stylometry is the statistical analysis of linguistic style in written or spoken language. It is used, and it was used for years, to do authorship attribution. And that is actually exactly what I needed. I wanted to find the author of the email. So stylometry looks at the lexical features and the syntactic features, with lexical aiming at word usage, and syntactic features more on the grammar and structure side of the text. So by stylometric analysis, you focus on how someone talks instead of what someone says. And it's a known technique, like the old school ransom text, so not ransomware notes, but ransom text, that they could also find the author based on this, or other use cases where they needed to find an anonymous author. For example, in threatening letters. So if you have these two examples and you extract the stylometric features, you get, well, these results. And you see these emails are really alike. This was also written by the same APT, by the way. So this is already one way to try to get to cluster these groups. However, it lacks some things. Stylometry has been used for years, but it doesn't understand the text itself. It doesn't have any context, domain-specific knowledge on contextual awareness. So yes, it can analyze the structure and some words, but it doesn't know the relationships between it. So that makes it in the end that my test set predicted in 41% of the cases the right APT. And I had a set of 33 actors sending phishing emails over the last 10 years, or at least enough to do something. So 3% was by just random guessing if you take it the dry way. 41% in this case was predicted right. And what contributed the most to that accuracy was the text richness. So how many unique words were used in the text, the average numbers of words in a sentence, so how long are your sentences, and the distribution of Unicode characters. Instead of saying, okay, the letter U was used these many times, I used the category of Unicode characters because I was dealing with a lot of languages in my set, because APT used the language of the person they're targeting most likely. So that really didn't work well. It was acceptable, but not great. So that was why I used the language model to dive deeper into the actual text and the relationships between sentences and words and the theme. So this language model analyzes text by considering also the context of each word, and it understands the relationship between sentences and words. And I used a pre-trained model for this. You have several pre-trained models for this. I used a multilingual BERT, B-E-R-T. It was pre-trained on 140 languages. It already analyzes like what is the most important word in a sentence, so it already knows some of the structure of sentences. So that's a great starting point. However, I fine-tuned it on email text because it was trained on Wikipedia articles, for example. That's not exactly what APTs use in their phishing emails, of course. There's a different kind of language or a different kind of structure in text. So I used a pre-trained model, but I fine-tuned it on my own data set. And this resulted in an accuracy of 60%, so that's already way better. But when it says it has an accuracy of 60% on your test set, and it predicts something, what does it actually do? It's like a black box, a machine learning model, at least to me. So I use SHAP, that's a package that can analyze what actually happened. Is for explainable AI. And I have used SHAP to highlight the parts of the email that contributed the most to the prediction. So I took a text. I got it from a blog. I extracted the text from a screenshot. I knew for sure that this text was not part of my data set already, and it predicted APT 29 as the result. Well, that's actually correct, because we already made the assessment that it should be APT 29. Not really strange, because this was part of the diplomatic orbiter campaign, and there were more similar emails to that. And by SHAP, it highlighted the parts of the email that were contributing the most to the prediction. So you can break it down. This was the text I put in, and the highlights were the most of the sick of the Omicron, COVID-19, mode of operation of the embassies, but also being transferred to a state of. So it takes part of the text that has the theme or word usage that is used most, or the type of words used most by this actor, but it also takes grammatical structure things. This gave already a bit more of insight to this email. Of course, you can also do this for every APT in your set. And that's what I did to see what are the lessons learned based on this. So I have some highlights. And the first one is that when you have an email sent by an actor, threat actor, and there is some follow-up on that, the use of text was not always consistent. I had two use cases for this. There was one APT where the attachment was being filtered out in the email because it was flagged as malicious, so there was no attachment at all in the email. And someone replied, oh, there is no attachment. Can you please send it to me in another way? And then they sent it over like a file sharing service to the victim. And that text accompanied with the link was different from the initial one. So it could indicate that there is someone else replying has replying duties in the group. The second one was a group that is really known for building rapport with someone. So first they have a conversation for days or weeks to build trust. And when they have the trust, then they do something malicious, like sending an attachment, malicious attachment. And also in that case, I saw that there's not always the same person or the same writing style used in the initial email and the email with the malicious action. The second one is when I plotted these usages, the word usages and text usage, it could be, and it was flagged as similar by the system, it could be in a totally different language about a different theme, but still be quite similar, also by the same APT. So that an email text is about another theme or topic doesn't mean that it's written by the same person. And the last one is that it is not only about theme-specific words, but also some grammatical structure in the email. For example, there was one APT, I analyzed all the text, and it had all the things highlighted with had, adverb, and past participle, or just all the words where it was speaking in the first person. So me and I, all those combinations were highlighted, because that was most unique to the group. Then the last one, we finished the part of the content, but the last one is the context. Because I told you there was a content part, but there's also a context part, and that is actually the part where the group, the threat actor, tries to influence you with the action so that you click. So there includes elements that shape its meaning and purpose, such as the theme, the goal, and social engineering techniques employed to influence the recipient. And I was extracting these features. So I used a local large language model. I used it on my own laptop because they're sensitive emails, and it works on my laptop, so why bother using external services? So I used a local large language model on my laptop, and I asked it, I made a prompt, can you please extract if there is an inclusion of personal touches or signatures in the email? Can you please show me more about the overall theme of the email? And can you tell me a bit more about the social engineering techniques used to influence the recipient? And I was giving this local large language model some extra training documents. My first proof of concept had the result that on my test set, I generated an own email test set, and it said, yeah, this email is legit because it was sent by the GRU. That was not the great start of this model, so I've used a specific already pre-trained model, and I gave it some extra context to actually better classify the persuasive techniques used in emails and get the theme out of it. So I gave it some instructions because it's always, well, it could overlap. For example, the persuasive techniques, what we see now. When I was saying I was analyzing the social engineering techniques, one thing that is really important in that are the principles of influence defined by Cialdini. Psychologist, you might know that already. He has defined 7 principles, but 6 of them can be used for phishing or in phishing emails. And the 6 are as follows. The first one is authority. So whenever an actor sends you an email from an embassy or as a CEO from something or a big company, they try to leverage authority to make you click and override the national caution you already have in your phishing, when you're opening your email. Mostly by also creating a sense of urgency, trust, or authority. So authority is the first one, and that's mostly used by threat actors. The second one is commitment and consistency, and this is used most by threat actors that have a follow-up or something. So they build rapport, and then when they want to include a malicious action, they can follow up on something that you already committed to. Because you're already engaging with the person, you are committed to that person, and then you're more likely to fall into the malicious link. The third one is the principle of liking, and that's everything including to common interests. So if you have the same interest, or you know that you both like to go to cybersecurity conferences, when you use a cybersecurity conference team, you're more likely to fall for that because it's something that is important to you. And the fourth one is reciprocity. And that is when I do something for you, you're more likely to do something for me back. So they use it to give you something or to make you, do something back because you already took some effort to do something. The fifth one is scarcity, and this one, I guess, is also used a lot in the consumer world. So please click now, only 3 days left, 24 hours left, we only have 2 in stock, stuff like that. And it's also used by threat actors to make you feel that you have to click because of urgency. And the last one, and that's actually the least used one in phishing emails, and that's the principle of social proof. And that is not used that much because it's used in other ways, but not in phishing emails. And you can explain it as, okay, you are more likely to fall for something if you know that your friends are already trust that entity. So for example, if you see that your friends or peers already trust an entity or an organization or a person, you're most likely to fall for that as well. One example is an operation where there was a recruiter trying to add a lot of people on LinkedIn, but not actually the person that they wanted to target in the first place. But they added all the friends and connections, and then after a while, they tried to add the person that they targeted. And the person who was maybe accepting the invitation saw that the recruiter was already trusted by a lot of his or her peers. So that's how the principle of social proof is used in phishing emails, but it's harder to find it in the actual text. But this is an example of that. And if you plot these principles of influence, that I found quite interesting to all the groups over the last 10 years, you see something like this. And a bar is one bar if it had at least 5 emails or campaigns in it, with the dark blue one being the principle of authority, the most used, I guess, and the least used was the yellow one, the principle of social proof, and the red one was that there was no direct principle of influence being used by a threat actor. So it shows that that these were being used, and sometimes for years, by the same actor. And if I try to predict who wrote the email by all these contextual features, it has an accuracy of 67%. So that's already a bit better, with the principle of influence being the most important feature in this. The second one was the sender category. That was not who was sending it, because that is a technical feature, in my opinion, but who was sending it? Was it a generic email address? Was it an organization, etc.? And the third one was the theme. What theme was being used? So that could be, is it important to the recipient? Is it a timeless one, could be sent to everyone? Or is it regarding a recent event, for example, the war or COVID? So these were the most important features. And these models are combined with a meta model. So now we come to the conclusion and to the prediction. So the predictions of each model were combined in the last model by using stacking. And then I can actually analyze if I can predict this. And this showed me the result of at least 88% accuracy. And that is because I found out there are just some groups that is totally not possible to do any predictions. It's 0%. And that means that I didn't have enough information from this group, so not that many emails, so it cannot really generalize the text and what is being used, or it has different kind of ways, so it couldn't find actually something really specific for that group. And 88% is when I used 23 threat actors out of 33, and 96% is for the top 10 being used. And the most interesting part is the groups that were left are actually the groups that we need to care about the most nowadays, because they're still active, they are big threats for the West, for example, and the groups that are not that active anymore with outdated data were the part that I had to remove from my set. So let's dive into some visualizations and to show you actually what are the lessons learned and how it worked. So I have 3 visualizations for you prepared. The first one is getting insights in clusters, so we can find similarities and differences. The second one is finding outliers, and we can reconsider the links. And the third one is find the author of the email itself. So can we use this to find the author based on the text and the social engineering techniques? So I'll switch to my other screen. Here you have the example. So first I'll dive into the cluster galaxy. And it looks like this. And normally I would play like a Star Wars sound so we can dive into the cluster galaxy, but it looks like this. So what you see here are clusters of campaigns of threat actors with different colors. I used UMAP, that's a technique to reduce dimensions of a data set to, in this case, 3D. So I use that to represent dots in a 3D space. And it looks like this, so you can go around a bit. And there are no duplicates in this set, and if it's close to each other, it could be part of the same campaign, but it's not the same text in this case. So you'll find some really dense clusters, but also less dense clusters in here. Well, the colors all look the same, by the way, so I'll dive into a couple of use cases that I found pretty interesting. So the first one is the yellow one, that is this. So the yellow one, you see that there are multiple subclusters within the yellow cluster, but there's also one cluster. Well, I really need to learn how to navigate. But there's also one cluster over here. And I was checking it out, and this one was a cluster with a different targeting from the group than the cluster that was used here. So they most likely use different techniques and different words to better fit the victim in this case. The second one is the green one, and that is also a strange cluster with, well, multiple subclusters. So here you see that it actually clustered the specific groups within the cluster and has some outliers here, but it was able to cluster it in the same place. And the most interesting one, I found it out by accident because I was just analyzing my results. I was checking out what stood out, and it was this orange and red one. I'll zoom in a bit. And these are pretty close if you compare it to the rest of the cluster. So I was checking out what are the threat groups representing the orange one and the red one. The orange one was an Iranian group, an Iranian APT, and the red one was a Russian group. And when I was Googling for these two groups, I found out that the Russian group in the past has taken over the C2 infrastructure of the Iranian group. So it could be that we linked the emails of these groups to two different actors, but could be the same because it shows the C2 for the same group. So in this case, this might be reconsidered that the emails were actually from another group and the attack was from another group. I don't say that is actually the case, but this is definitely something worth looking into. Now we have the third one. And I used the 2D. I used TSNE for this one. That works if you have really similar clusters in terms of size. And you see on the upper left, you see that that's a cluster, and right at the top or the bottom right. And these two clusters were both within the same unit from a nation state. And you see that there's here one outlier. So this is actor 2 and this is actor 1. And I can zoom in this small spot and you see that it's quite similar. So this is definitely, I would love to dive into more. Well, it's hard when you're talking about attribution because you don't have something to actually validate it. But this is something to reconsider. And then the last one, that is subclustering. So when I dive into one group, I know for that group that it has an initial access cluster. So that group, part of the group is only focusing on getting initial access of a network. And you see that the initial access cluster is somewhere here, and the rest of the group is here, also defined with several subclusters. And you see that the initial access cluster is also in a cluster of the actual actor. So it can mean that we didn't do the right attribution or clustering. It could be also that some malware developer was being used on different groups, etc. So this is also something worth looking into. And I was talking a lot about subclusters within the clusters, and I was checking them manually. Why are there multiple groups within one group? And by checking the text and the actual emails of these subgroups, I saw that the distance between the dots in the same group is smaller when there is the same targeting. So groups, yeah, they try to adapt these writing styles for their victim. They change over time. So you see that the writing styles can also change over time, or that it's more likely to be part of the same campaign, but it also didn't look like the same campaign because it was about a totally different topic with totally different victims. And what to reflect on what I did or told at the start of this presentation is that I took all the underlying unks of an APT as part of the APT. But we know it for a low, medium, or high confidence suspicion. It could be another group or a subgroup within the group itself. So it could also show like different subclasses within the group. And then the last one, which one is the most interesting for threat hunters, I think, is to find the author of the group. And I did that by to combine this with technical clustering. So what I did, I went to VirusTotal and I was looking for attachments that were flagged by the community as used by a specific group. In this case, Muddy Water, also known as Temp Zagros. And I was only checking out attachment that had an actual email attached to it in VirusTotal. So I was looking this up and I found 18 results. And with this 18 attachment, there were 19 emails attached to it. And I'll show you a video of how this works and how the model works in action. So first I remove the duplicates. I see there are 13 unique emails found. I'm extracting stylometric features. I'm extracting contextual features. And yes, this is sped up because it takes some time to have a local LLM extracting this information. So it has the stylometric features. It has the contextual features extracted. Then it loads my fine-tuned meta model. The threshold was set, so I said everything in the upper 20% of the prediction, show me that. And it found 2 emails that are likely to be written by this actor. Of course, I wanted to check if that's real. Yes, these were labeled by external sources, so they were named in blog posts by vendors or by researchers, and these were actually written. There was a lot of noise within these 19 emails. I was checking them out, but most of the time, these were hit by like numerous Yara rules. So most likely, they are really noisy Yara rules. Not again. So to conclude, it was quite effective to cluster based on behavioral features, at least for the majority of emails. Not for every APT, I consider that as a loss, but it's nice to see that it still works on a lot of APTs. This underscores the potential of including behavioral features also in threat hunting and clustering. It could be useful for linking it to groups. It could also be interesting to find new TTPs because it finds similar writing styles, but it finds another kind of malware, for example. So that might be worth looking into because it might indicate that a group is using different malware type. It's also nice to understand trends and see new phishing TTPs. And of course, I said, well, there could be technical challenges. There could be challenges when you're doing it on a technical level, but there are also challenges when you do it on behavioral level. We all know that the threat actors may use LLMs, and we have actual evidence that some groups do that, and that might blur the lines between the writing styles of these groups. And the second one is there was one example of one group using the exact text of another group, but including their own malware. And if you have copycats in the room of APTs, then it might not filter out the right one because they're using the same behavioral features. And to conclude, I want to cite a really wise man here from Vegas. When there is an APT using a specific way, a specific writing style, or a way of delivering the email with persuasion or principles of influence, they might do that for years and years, as this research shows. And that is why we, as cybersecurity specialists, threat hunters, and people in threat intelligence should also focus on this to better defend ourselves. I want to thank you for this presentation, and special kudos to some of my colleagues. Thank you so much for being here. It was an honor, and we have some time for questions, but also you can meet me in the business hall at 5 p.m. Thanks for being here.